Parliamentary Secretary. And I would also like to recognize my National Capital Region colleagues, the Parliamentary Secretary, Andrew Leslie, Madame Anita Vandenbelt, and Mr. Chandra Hari. C'est un grand honneur d'avoir à l'Université d'Ottawa, dans ma circonscription, une institution qui encourage la curiosité, l'innovation, la créativité et la collaboration pour créer un changement positif pour nous-mêmes et pour le monde entier. That is why I'm so excited to introduce you to our amazing guests for today. Bill Nye, the science guy. Caitlin Mirren, whose research at Queen's University has led to incredible advances in cancer treatments. And Aida Elage, a graduate student here at University of Ottawa studying chemistry. And of course, our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Merci beaucoup d'être ici aujourd'hui. I will ask my colleague, Parliamentary Secretary Kate Young, to the Minister of Science to join me. Shh, it's her turn now. Thank you very much.
I think I'm okay. I think I've got this microphone. Thank you, Mona. Hello, everyone. How is everyone? Merci. Thank you so much for coming today. Bonjour. It's great to be here at the University of Ottawa to talk to everybody about my favorite subject, science. Les sciences, quel sujet fascinant. And this is one of the most exciting times in Canadian history to be talking about science, technology, engineering, and math. As Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Science, I have had the honor of working with Minister Kirsty Duncan over the past year as she paved the way for increased science investment in Canada. As Minister, one of the first things that she did was, when she took over the science portfolio, was to call for a review of how science is funded in this country. And rather surprisingly, it's the first time in over 40 years that we had questioned how we fund science and research. And it was about time. As a government, we know that if we want to be innovative and stay competitive in this ever-changing world, we need to be bold. We can't let opportunities pass us by. And we can't let over half the population sit on the sidelines. We must encourage more young women and minorities to consider STEM as a career choice. It's a bit like when I started over 40 years ago in my first career of journalism, I was always considered the token female. Well, that's still happening in science, especially in engineering, and we have to change that. We need more young people, young women, to choose science. And how do we change that? And how do we, as a country, prioritize science, fundamental research, applied research? How do we make it a priority? Well, last week we started. As a federal government, we made a tremendous investment in science. We are investing over $4 billion over the next 5 years for research and fundamental science. It's the largest investment in fundamental research in Canadian history. It's a bold move and one that is getting attention from around the world. To talk about what our government is doing and to find out where we're heading in the science field, I'm going to introduce you to two special people. The first one, as Mona mentioned, well, neither one needs any introduction. We'll start with Bill Nye, the science guy. Would you please welcome Bill Nye, who...
Good to see you. Yes, ma'am. Good morning. Bonjour.
They didn't even let me talk about how you're saving the world with your new Netflix program.
That's right.
So, thank you.
Turn
Bill.
it up loud, everybody. And there is a season 2. It started in December. Don't miss it if you can.
That's right. Well,
People
thank you,
don't
Bill.
know
And we're also joined by someone who thinks of himself as a bit of a science nerd, and that is our Prime Minister. Would you please welcome the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau. Well, this is great, and it's pretty well known. I did say you were a bit of a science nerd. And I think whenever people think about science, Bill, your name comes up, because as far as science education is concerned, you've done it all. And you keep plugging along, and we're hearing more and more about how science is important in this world. And I think I want to start by asking how the two of you just got really turned on to science, and how we turn on our next generation, because some of those people are in this room right now.
Well, when it comes to getting turned on about science, I like to say I don't remember. I may have been 3, but I think I was like about 3.5. And I was on our front porch in the city of Washington, D.C., and I got stung by a bee, which was traumatic, very troubling. And I was crying the way a guy might do, a guy of that age. And my mother put ammonia on it. And the chemist here, Caitlin, Ada, ammonia on the bee sting, it denatures the protein. Yeah. So it felt better. But on the ammonia bottle is a skull and crossbones. You know, my mother's trying to kill me, which I could understand. But that I really did lead to a fascination. And the other thing was I just spent a lot of time watching bees as a result of that. And aerodynamically, bees are amazing. They're just amazing. Forward, back, up, and down. It wasn't until very recently, really, till about the time most of you, I think, were born, that bee flight was really understood. There's these crazy vortices where the wings go backwards through this vortex, this whirlpool of air. It's very cool. So I digress, but everybody just appreciate how much science affects you every day, all the time. Look around the room. Everything that you see, every shape here, and all the material, every shape came out of somebody's head, and all the materials were shaped by somebody who understood the nature of the materials. And then a lot of people you'll meet eat food, and all the food we get now is through modern agriculture is really science, science, science.
Yeah, so it's everywhere.
But I think there's a bit of a wrong approach in your question, Kate, because that asking, you know, when did we discover that we were fans of science? The thing is that every single human being starts off as a scientist. When you're a baby, you are a scientist. If I, make this noise, wow, I get milk. If I push this button or knock this thing off the table, it lands on me and it hurts. You're curious. You're curious. You're always asking questions about, well, why is the sky blue? What does this do? What does that do? Why is this way? Well, what do you mean? There's going to be consequences if I do this. Being a kid is constantly testing, discovering, hypothesis, experiment, solution, learning. It's as we grow older, we start to forget about being scientists. And I think for me, the more we can get young people to realize that asking those questions and continuing to ask tough questions about how the world works, why the world works this way, why things are this way, why are they not this other way, is absolutely essential. And making sure that we're encouraging that freedom of curiosity, empowering people to actually chase down those questions that nobody has been able to answer yet, is hugely important, both as a society, but also deliberately as we face what is an uncertain future. We know there are going to be massive disruptions in our world, whether it's through automation and AI and the transformation of the workplace, the transformation of work. These kinds of things can be really, really scary. But one of the things we're seeing in some places in the world is people are saying, okay, well, we're going to stretch out this phase as long as we can and resist the changes coming. And here in Canada, we've made another decision. We've said, you know what? That change is coming. Let's be part of it. Indeed, let's lead on it. That's why we invested $100 million in AI research across the country over the past year, and why we're putting close to $4 billion now in science, specifically, a lot of it in fundamental research. One of the conversations people have had over the past years has been, oh, commercialization. Let's make sure we're investing in innovations that are going to make money quickly so we can get a return on investment rapidly on science. And yes, there's a lot of things we can and should be improving in terms of commercialization in science, and that'll always be an important piece of it. But the fundamental stuff is essential. The stuff you don't know how you're going to make money off of it 5 years from now, 10 years from now, even 20 years from now. But the discovery for discovery's sake, for building blocks that will eventually lead to new discoveries and new approaches to solving problems nobody even expected. That fundamental research is essential, and it takes a confident nation willing to say, you know what, we're going to invest now in our young researchers who are going to follow their curiosity, because we know 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, that's going to make a massive difference in the everyday life of everyone, we hope. But that knowledge for knowledge's sake and that excitement about it is a big part of what this budget is all about, and why I'm so excited and optimistic about the future we have in a challenging world, because we're investing in giving Canadians the tools to do that.
Bill Nye, you had thumbs up when the Prime Minister talked about our investments in science. Thumbs up.
Thumbs up's good. You know, my understanding, I took 3 years of Latin, and look, I'm fine. But this is when you're going to kill the guy, which was popular, apparently. I paraphrase. So, but we know what this means. It's good. Now, here's the thing, everybody. We get in this thing, you use the word entrepreneurial, use the word risk-taking, and startups, but it leads to the expectation that you're going to make money right away, and you might, but most of the time you don't. And it's just, this is where I'm just thrilled that you share this view, Mr. Prime Minister, because this so-called home run mentality, that's a baseball reference, if you don't mind. It's not hockey. It's like hockey, but it's different.
Okay.
We know what baseball is.
We know baseball.
We got the Blue Jays. Yeah. We don't have the Expos anymore, but we do have the Blue Jays.
Well, and about the Expos, no, they came to Washington, D.C., my hometown, so I'm ambivalent. I mean, I'm so sorry you lost the Expos-ish. No, so, and when you go to a baseball game in Seattle, even though Vancouver is nominally a long way from Toronto, half the people in the stadium are Blue Jays fans, so it's all good. So anyway, the home run mentality, you go up to a home plate and expect to hit a home run. You usually don't. It's quite difficult. And so you just don't want to have any science program where you have that expectation that you're going to have great success right away. You know, what do we all admire right now is SpaceX. Everybody talks about SpaceX and Elon Musk and stuff. And who doesn't love them? But keep in mind, they are allowed to make mistakes. Although I guess the company pushes very hard and it's a very competitive place to work, they nevertheless, when the rocket bounces off the drone ship and falls in the ocean, they go, okay, we're going to try it again. And that's, it's a really important outlook, and you talked about this earlier.
Yeah, and that's when I was a teacher, one of the things I tried to explain to my students was, you actually don't learn nearly as much from your successes as you do from your failures. Because think about it, when you succeed, and you ask yourself, well, why did you succeed? You shrug and say, well, because I'm awesome. That's, of course I succeeded, because I'm awesome. But when you
are awesome,
when you don't succeed, your students are awesome, yeah. But when you don't succeed, when you fail, when the rocket falls into the ocean, when you totally mess up your plans and it falls apart, why? Is it because you're terrible? No. You start to think, okay, well, why didn't it succeed? Well, because the wind wasn't in the right direction, or I didn't get the right advice, or I didn't do enough research, or I didn't have enough capital, or I didn't, you think about the reasons why you didn't succeed, and then you apply that to the next step. So there's two things about that. One, we have to be open to accepting that it's not going to work the first time, and you have to work it through, and that's what investing long-term stable funding towards science is all about. But we also have to be able to apply ourselves to figuring out why we succeeded as well, not just why we failed. And that's something that having a, a strong approach on investing in science will help with.
It's a process. That's what science is. Two things for me. It's the body of knowledge, data, the atomic number of rubidium or whatever it is, and then it's also the process. It's, you guys, this idea that you can know nature, that we have a means by which we can understand nature, is really profound. In ancient times, apparently people just accepted there was stuff you would never know. But kind of the premise of the bit in modern science is that you can know, that although there's a great deal that is not known, and in fact, when it comes to the cosmos, it seems like the more we discover, the more we realize how little we understand it all.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, we have a means by which we can know things, that it's so-called susceptible to analysis. You were a mechanical engineer for a couple of years.
I studied mechanical engineering. I never made it through, but it gave me enough of an appreciation of the kind of problem solving of engineering, the approach of trying to solve problems in a tangible way, using science, using math, using those approaches.
Yeah. I'm mechanical engineer.
Yeah, you succeeded at it. I know.
Just important to keep in mind that engineering is using science to make things and solve problems. And it's really something that we all take for granted.
One of the things that I've been talking about a lot as I travel around the world and talk to folks who are looking at innovation as the path forward, as solving those challenges, I point out one of the fundamental advantages that Canada has when it comes to science, innovation, creativity in general. And that's something that is often overlooked as a fundamental building block of success in problem solving, and that's our diversity. When you have a group of people who all have the same background, the same story, put in a room to solve a problem, they're going to approach it from the same direction. And if you contrast that with a room filled with students or people, researchers of every different corner of the world, every different religion, all the different backgrounds, all sorts of different life stories where they grew up in different neighborhoods, different approaches, when you come to solve a problem, whether it's a scientific problem or a political problem or a community or a business problem, having multiple perspectives coming into that problem actually allows you to solve it better. So the one thing that we keep saying in Canada, that diversity is a source of strength, is one of the things that makes University of Waterloo, for example, one of the top recruiting schools for Silicon Valley, because of the diversity that's built in. Here in University of Ottawa, the diversity that we have here is just extraordinary, and that always needs to be recognized as an opportunity, a way of challenging each other to think differently about the challenges and the problems that we're coming at. And that advantage that Canada has, contrasting with the rest of the world right now, is something that we're doubling down on in being open to immigration and drawing in great researchers from around the world, because we know that's going to help us leapfrog through these next challenges. Has that been something that you've experienced?
Well, I'm a big fan of diversity. Just fundamentally, everybody, half of the people are girls and women. So why don't we have half of the scientists and engineers be women? And there we go. How'd I come up with that? That's amazing. Wow. I mean, just you guys, when I was coming of age, there were very few women in engineering. But and I mention it because people with different life experiences just approach problems differently. And the example I think about all the time, I'm the CEO of the Planetary Society, the world's largest non-governmental space interest organization, advancing space science and exploration so that people everywhere will know the cosmos and our place within it. And then the elevator door closes. We built a solar sail spacecraft, and we have a second one that's going to fly in June on the second SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket. Very cool. But the people who build it are almost all from the U.S., and so we designed a spacecraft that looks like you went to Home Depot and got tape measures to be the booms, and we use the term boom just like on a sailboat. But I spent a lot of time, a lot of people involved in solar sailing are from Japan. Japanese aerospace exploration. And their solar sails, they've flown one and they're planning another one, another big one, huge one. They're very much like origami. Just their approach. The U.S. one looks like we're folding.
Rolled out, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so they both systems have advantages and disadvantages. But I mention it because it's something from my experience that's clearly so cultural.
Yeah.
And so what is the best way to do it? I don't know, man. But both ways work, and by working together, I'm sure you're going to get a better spacecraft. So, by the way, speaking of SpaceX, I always carry a Canadian fiver.
I can't accept that. We have an ethics commissioner.
Let me tell you what, it's not available. Okay? I was with a guy from the White House. He was quoted in the paper, Phil Larson, and he said, "Can I have that?" No. No, but on the back of your money, you celebrate the space program, least ways you used to. And so I can't tell.
Still do.
I think that's Chris Hadfield.
Yeah, that's Chris Hadfield.
Yeah. He's wearing a helmet with the visor down. It's hard to say. But I mention that because Canadian Space Agency for years has a reputation. Can I take this off? You look so comfortable. Yes. You spin this. Here, let me just.
You know how to do that.
Still funny to me, still fresh. So the other hilarious joke is, you know, in television they have the clapboard. They go like this. Then then you go like it hits you in the head. It's really funny. Okay, according to me. But Canadian Space Agency used to be, or is, really involved in every space mission around the world. Everybody uses an instrument from Canadian Space. So I really encourage Canadians to pursue space, invest in space, because it leads to innovations. And I mean in the traditional sense of the innovation, new ways of doing things. Yeah. Because you solve problems that have never been solved before.
Well, not only do I agree, but we just appointed as our Governor General one of Canada's great astronauts, Julie Payette, who is an amazing scientist in her own right, and is focused on leading the charge in space, in science, in investment. The same way Kate Young, our Parliamentary Secretary for Science, and our Minister for Science, Kirsty Duncan, who's a Nobel Prize-winning scientist, drove this review into fundamental science and is excited about the kinds of investments we need to make.
Let me, if I may,
please.
Way to go. Two things I'd really like to see in your lifetime. The first one is finding life on another world. At the Planetary Society, we like to say life in our lifetime. I claim that if we were to find evidence of life, this would in the best case, some microbe that's still making a living on Mars, or Europa, the moon of Jupiter with twice as much seawater as the Earth, or Titan, the moon of Saturn with similar ocean conditions. If we were to discover evidence of life, it would change everything. It might just be a like a fossilized pond scum. That would be extraordinary. And the other thing is, it's a real thing, is we don't want the Earth to get hit with an asteroid. And you know, TEDx, you know those things. I made mention of this at the TEDx, and everybody laughed. An asteroid. Oh, I was a grown-up. I was working at that time, I guess I was at Sunstrand, working on avionics, black boxes. And when the crater off Chicxulub, Mexico was discovered. So when I was in second grade, Mrs. McGonigal, my teacher, read to us from a great big book that the reason the ancient dinosaurs went extinct is because they had small brains. So the mice and the rabbits took all the Tyrannosaurus food. No, and she was just like, that's ridiculous. I mean, come on. There's a rabbit, I'm a Tyrannosaurus, you know. I mean, come on. And so it was really in my lifetime that the best idea of what happened to the ancient dinosaurs was discovered. And in my grandfather's time, there was no such thing as relativity. No one had any idea what it was. It didn't affect his life. The world kept spinning. People navigated the world's oceans and so on. Beginning to understand some remarkable things about the cosmos, but no relativity. Yet everybody here, is there anybody here who does not have a mobile phone? Yeah, okay.
That's right.
Oh, there's one. There's one. Anyway, people, thank goodness you're here. You know which side of the street you're on without looking at your phone. But that information comes from outer space. And we all, if the weather report's off 20 minutes, people start complaining, and that's all from outer space.
I know I don't have much to do up here because you guys could go on for hours, but I would like to invite two young female researchers to the stage. And first off, Caitlin Miron. She's identified a chemical compound that may be able to switch off cancer cells in order to stop them from spreading. Caitlin, can you please come up here? Thanks so much. Caitlin is a PhD student at Queen's University, so thank you for joining us. Ada Hellage. Ada, you were born, come on up, Ada. You were born in Lebanon and received your Bachelor of Science at the Lebanese University in Beirut. Please welcome Ada Haidar. Thank you, Ada.
Will she get on the outside? Give it a...
Well, we started talking about women and how we need more young women in science. The two of you are fantastic mentors. And I want to get a sense from you if you were challenged, if it was something that you really had to fight against to make sure that you continued to find your way in science research. Caitlin?
I certainly, I've had some very excellent mentors since undergrad, I would say, who are women in science. One of them is my supervisor. So it was never really a fight, although I guess my dad was disappointed I didn't do engineering. But
all you did was cure cancer? That's all you did?
You got Bill Nye upset at you, too.
I mean, Caitlin, do I understand this, that you may have found a way to turn off cancer cells?
So it's moving in that direction. So we're coming up with chemical compounds that can stabilize particular DNA architectures that, when stabilized, are kind of like barriers, and they prevent access to particular sections of DNA that will promote events leading to cancer. So we're not at the stage we're doing fundamental research. This was a discovery more for the sake of discovery, but we are seeing that there might be applications down the line.
I mean, that could just change the world.
Yes, we'll see.
So, you know, well, what drives everybody? It's really a fundamental thing. And then, Ada, if I may, excuse me just a second. I had something I had not thought about till this year. We did a show on time travel, Bill Nye Saves the World. And we had, no, that's the name of the show. We had Brandon Braga, who you may not have heard of, but yes, you have. He's the producer of all the Star Trek movies. And he pointed out that any time travel story, whether it's Wrinkle in Time, which is coming out as a movie now, is really, a time travel story is really about death. And if you think about, it's about our dealing with it. If you think about what really drives you to cure cancer, or to make the discovery about, to really know our place in the cosmos, to find life on another world, to innovate, to include more people. It's really about our time here on Earth and doing the best we can with it. And that's why I'm really so excited to be here with you all, because Canada, under your leadership, is embracing science to improve the quality of life for everybody in our time here on Earth. It's really curing cancer is really an amazing idea. And you're sitting here with somebody who may have made a discovery that would affect the way everybody thinks about his or her future.
Ada, tell us about your research.
Well, currently I'm a PhD candidate. I'm working on synthesizing some nanoparticles, and especially supported nanoparticles. Why supported? Because we're going to do heterogeneous catalysis. In this way, the separation of the catalyst after doing the reaction would be like easy, with no contamination of the product that we're going to make. And our objective is to, my work, I'm working on applying those nanomaterials into heterogeneous catalysis to act as a catalyst in order to form a desired product, which is a valuable molecule as a precursor in the pharmaceutical industry, or even in like make some additive for for in food or in perfume. So what I have done so far, like 2 types of different reactions. The first one is to make anethol, which is like one of the main additive in food industry. And the second one is to make a cross-coupling and form a compound that has a triple bonds. And this compound is a precursor for loss of molecules that's kind of like valuable molecules. Currently, I'm working on taking those glasswool fibers, so something like new and innovative, like something like really creative. And the idea is to functionalize the surface of those fibers. And now you don't have a powder, you have fiber, and just decorate with nanoparticles, then apply the new material.
You use the word decorate?
Well, it's like better decorate than doping. When we say doping, it means you change the properties of the material. So we try to use like the right word, like it means like depositing like on the surface,
on top,
or
yeah.
like decorating. Let's say use some art like stuff. Decorating those glass wool with different metals. So we did with palladium, gold, we tried cobalt, ruthenium, copper as well. This is like something not expensive. And apply in some organic transformation. And the idea is for potential use for the flow system in order to make like a big amount of product. And then we have another project that I'm not involved in. I'm involved just in decorating the glass wool. The project is to do a water purification for Kenya. So we have a collaboration with a university from Kenya in order to do this type of water purification. And this project will involve not the glass wool fiber, the TiO2 fiber, and decorating those TiO2 fiber with metal nanoparticles.
Ti2 is titanium dioxide?
Yeah, titanium dioxide.
Yeah, you don't dumb it down, sorry. Titanium dioxide, yeah.
Well, is there going to be a test on this?
You see how you're into it. Yeah. But here's the thing, my claim, there's 3 things we want for everybody in the world. We want clean water, reliable, renewably produced electricity, and then access to the internet, or whatever the internet, whatever the kids call the internet in the coming decades. So
I think they've created something called MySpace. They want to spend a little
I heard about that.
Yeah, but all the kids are using
the kids, right? The kids with their electric phone machines. So you're working on increasing food production and cleaning water.
Cleaning water and I'm gonna call it green chemistry. So
green chemistry.
Yeah, it's like more heterogeneous, mild conditions instead of using heat, using light, because I'm from a photochemistry lab. So using a light as a source, as a catalyst in order to drive reactions. So it's more like mild, like room temperature. Well, it's not room temperature because when you're shining light, so the temperature will be like up to 40, 50, but still, like it's not 100 or 200 degrees. And atmospheric pressure, so it's more like green chemistry. So that's what I'm involved in, what I like.
Obviously very passionate about what you're doing. How do we encourage more young women, like the 2 of you, to get involved in science?
Well, I certainly think that the budget coming out with that emphasis on promoting women in science is certainly something that will be valuable for sure. I was really excited to see that. And I think it comes down to, for us, it's really important that we have role models. So whether it's at a faculty level or in industry or whatever, but be able to see if she's done it, then why can't I? And to have that example going forward.
And I think one of the things to remember is that it's as important a goal as it is, as Bill pointed out, making sure that more women are in STEM programs, more women are in science, getting the numbers up, getting the balance there is really great. But you also have to think about the kinds of things that women scientists will do tend to be different than what male scientists do. And having that diversity of approaches and having, in many cases, more reflections on on social impacts or impacts on a community or longer term impacts than men choosing, oh, can we build a really big rocket? There's men like explosions, women are building
Everybody
things.
likes explosions.
Everybody likes explosions. But bringing a variety of perspectives to bear on the science is going to be really important, and encouraging women to succeed in STEM is going to be hugely important as a driver of not just growth in real terms, but also in the kind of solutions that we find. Do you find that?
Yeah, well, and I can add to that, like having some support, like having a good environment, like whether family or partner or parents, it's very good to have this support from all those people beside having a role model. For example, in my case, when I did my undergrad study, so my parents kind of, if I'm gonna use the right word, pushing or encourage me to go to do chemistry, and I moved from a small town to a big town, and in order to do my study. Then they encouraged me to do not stop there, go and do your teaching certificate and go and be good, stand up for yourself. And then when I moved here, so now my husband is he's my partner who's supporting me and who's giving me these positive vibes in order to keep going. And I think everyone, not only girls, whether boys or girls, they should have this support in order to achieve their goals. So you need to have a dream, then set up your goal, work hard until it's done.
But isn't it also fun?
Yes.
Yes,
Always.
No, this is the thing for me in science, is it's so exciting to be able to understand nature, to be able to figure something out.
Yeah, it is fun and it's stressful at the same time. It's like I'm non-stop working, but actually I do like it. And
You're the one that was upset you didn't get an A+, right?
yeah.
You were my favorite people when I was in school. Yeah.
And actually the funny part that the prof, I went to see him and asked him why, and he was like, are you serious? Yeah, I want to see my exam, please. Oh, you're serious? Yeah, I am.
So what was the problem?
So I missed my question, actually.
Oh, you did? Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
But too bad.
It's always the question.
She's still a little shaken. 3 or 4 years ago?
It's a traumatic
Yeah,
experience.
3 years ago.
But I mean, for me, the best thing about science and about discovery and about challenge yourself and being curious is when you find something that forces you to rethink the assumptions and what you expect. I'll never forget a class I did, a science in teaching, a science class, where we all had, the challenge was different ways of extinguishing a candle or something like that. And one of the students put a styrofoam cup over a lit candle, filled it with water, and said, perfect. The candle will light, will melt the styrofoam cup, and the water will gush out and put out the candle. How many of you thinks that'll work? Okay, you guys are being dishonest. All right? Everyone thinks, okay, perfect. The candle will melt the styrofoam, and the water will gush out. But of course, the candle, even though it would melt a styrofoam cup that was empty, will not heat the styrofoam hot enough to melt it on that layer that's touching the water until the water boils and evaporates. So the styrofoam actually won't melt, and you will not extinguish the candle. You can actually boil water in a styrofoam cup straight over an open flame. But until you actually see that for yourself or have someone describe it adequately vividly, you think, well, of course it's going to melt that hole, and it's not going to work. You won't be able to boil water in a styrofoam cup. So one of those cone paper cups, to be able to actually see that happen causes you to rethink some assumptions that you didn't even realize you had. And that challenging one's worldview and causing one to think differently about something that you expected is what science is fundamentally about. And we need to challenge those assumptions we make around just everything we do. And that's where science done well is absolutely essential for everything we do.
So there's a famous quote now from Isaac Asimov that's all over the electric internet. science doesn't.
It's a bunch of tubes, right? The internet is a bunch of tubes.
It used to be a bunch of tubes, but it works the same way, people. I know I'm so old. How old are you? I had vacuum tubes when I was in physics class. But the famous quote is, science doesn't start with, aha. It starts with, that's funny. Or you notice something unexpected, right? And this is what we all dream of. And I hope, really, I hope that Canada embraces that nationally and just makes it part of your culture. This is the thing about NASA we talked about earlier. NASA is the best brand the United States has. People who hate the United States, which I can understand, still respect what NASA does, because it has this vision, this idea that we can do anything, that we can solve any problem. And the example, if you don't believe me, when I was a kid, cars, our family car had fins on it. And the fins have no function whatever. They're just kind of look like a rocket, and where everybody's building rockets and isn't this the coolest thing. And the tail lights will look like the rocket exhaust, the flames, because it was just in the culture that you could accomplish great things. And I hope, especially now, with you in charge, I don't know if you're in charge, with you leading.
Canadians are in charge.
Yeah, with you leading, yeah, you work for them, that it becomes part of the culture.
Well,
and in the United States, I very much hope we get that back soon.
Well, you're talking about an Isaac Asimov quote. One of my favorite quotes is actually an Einstein quote, who points out that the problems we have created cannot be solved at the level of thinking that created them. We need to challenge ourselves to go to that next step. We need to make new discoveries. We need to question why things have been done a certain way in the past and be bold enough to move forward. And that's why I've always been, you know, whether as a teacher or a youth critic for the party when we were in opposition, or now as Prime Minister and Minister of Youth at the same time, counting on young people, not just to get involved and help shape the direction we're doing, but to challenge us and to say, well, why can't we change the status quo? Why can't we embrace change? And why can't we look at things completely differently? And your voices on that are going to be absolutely essential, because young people are better positioned to embrace change than anyone else, because from, you know, elementary school to high school to university to the job market to living with your parents to living on your own to starting a family, your life is all about massive transitions that, quite frankly, once someone's an adult and in a certain career path, would be extremely destabilizing. And we need to draw on your strength and your ability to adapt and embrace change.
Ada, Caitlin, let's go, people.
There you go.
What are you sitting up here for? Get out there.
Well, you know, this would be a great time to maybe open it up for some questions from the audience and see what's on the minds of the people here. A cross-section of the public and university students. We have microphones around.
Put up your hand and someone will get to you with a mic. There we go. There's one right there. In the black jacket, green shirt.
And there's baseball.
Introduce yourself, say your name, and ask the question.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bibi Hakim. I'm a Joint Honors Political Science and Public Admin student here at the university. A concern of mine is mental health, and I was curious to know, within science and innovation, a growing issue is mental health. What are your thoughts on that, and do you think that this could be a supporting issue in maybe the next budget or in this budget, and do you think that as advocates, there will be more support for those suffering with mental health?
Listen, absolutely. I know how challenging it is to face down mental health challenges. My mom has struggled with mental health issues all her life and has become an amazing advocate for dealing with mental health. And we know that mental health is a massive unaddressed challenge within our society, within our health system. We need to do a better job of destigmatizing, and one of the things that always encourages me is just about any time I go to a town hall or a public meeting, usually a young person gets up to ask about mental health. And that's not something we would have seen even 10 years ago. So there's a lot more open conversations about that in a really promising way. In our first budget, we put forward $5 or $6 billion over the coming years directly towards mental health services with the provinces, specifically targeting young people. We know that in most cases, mental health challenges get their first symptoms, or get their first apparition before someone turns 25. And if we give the opportunity for young people to get the mental health services, support, treatment they need when they're young, they are much more likely to be able to manage and succeed with that challenge throughout the course of their life and continue to live happy, productive, complete lives. So we know that investing in mental health across the board is super important. On the other side of things, mental health innovation and solutions and scientific research into treatments and causes of mental health is another thing that we're investing significantly in.
So along this line, everybody, if you want to solve a problem, the example that I come across a lot is addiction. Is there anybody here whose life has not been touched by addiction? No, nobody. I mean, everybody has either dealt with it him or herself, or has friends and family. I believe that if we can get magnetic resonance images, MRIs, another order of magnitude finer, in other words, get it down from 1/10 of a millimeter to 1/100th of a millimeter, we will be a lot closer to understanding addiction. And I think we'll be, because people get addicted to gambling, and they behave the same way as when they're addicted to opioids. But there's no chemical involved. Wait a minute, what's going on? So I just think that technically or scientifically, that we are so close to understanding where memories are stored and how your memory, your life experience affects your dopamine production and so on. So if you're looking for a technical challenge, and maybe it's a chemical challenge, maybe it's a protein challenge, we are really close to understanding human brains in a way that I don't think has ever been possible until 20 years from now. So get her done, people.
Okay.
Excellent. Take another question from the right here. You, in the back. Yeah.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Abigail. I am studying French, Spanish, and German, and I'm also a student mentor here for the university. So my question is more on the arts side. Would you say that arts, and as someone that studied Latin, more specifically languages, are related to the science, and how important is their relationship?
Did you say art?
Yes.
Yeah, well, look at this room. I mean, somebody put all these shapes here to affect the way you feel. You got to have art. And I think you will find that many scientists are big fans of art. There's some convergence, and I claim it comes from passion, something that brings you joy. Discovery and art. And you can speak, what, 4 languages? I suck. Anyway, you must, I'm serious, being able to communicate with people in their own language in 4 different languages has got to give you insight into how people think that I'll never have. So carry on, change the world. Now, one of the things that's really profound is that we are all more alike than we are different. And it's really something. And people, when somebody says, I can't express it in words, or there's no words for this, and such, you go, really? Of course there is. Just it's a little more long-winded or something. One of the Astronautical Congress, I know you never miss it, was in Toronto, so 4 years ago, yeah. And the joke that just killed was the Canadian space. In Canadian space, no one can hear you apologize.
But I think one of the things that I've always liked about the sort of the intersection of art and science is that both of them challenge the way we see the world from very different ways. Science causes us to rethink what we think we know about the universe, and art often challenge us to think differently about how we feel about the world around us and about the universe. A good artist will challenge us on fundamental levels and enhance and challenge and excite us and carry us away. And it's also a way of expressing things that do have difficult ways of putting things together. So I think, you know, as Bill said, the intersection between art and science has always been extremely, extremely important. And as we think about a world in which computers, whether it's AI or automation or what have you, or robotics, are going to be able to do more and more things that human beings used to be able to do, as we get to the higher level of things that robots and computers can't replicate, you get into things like, you know, poetry and language and art and design and a level of creativity and pattern recognition and playing with things that is still further than computers can go. And they're getting better, but we've still got that headway on sort of the emotional, creative side that I think becomes more and more important as we have a world of automation that is more and more able to take over more and more complex tasks, but not the really creative ones.
So, you know, are you afraid of artificial intelligence? Is everybody afraid that robots are going to take over and kill us all? So,
there's some nodding in the back.
Before that happens, just here's the thing that it's about art and science. Artificial intelligence now is where you make a machine that can learn, that improves its performance, and we all, I think, at some level, really prefer that to machines that can't change. But when you get a machine that decides to make art, then you'll be that will be art. That will be intelligent, maybe. So there's something fundamentally different between us and the machines we make so far. How many people are excited about the singularity? Really? Nobody?
They've all seen Terminator.
Yeah, so I don't think it's going to happen for that reason. I don't think you're going to get a machine that decides to make a better omelet just because it's cool. So lead on.
Okay, next question. Got someone way at the back.
I just can't. Don't make me pick, man.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, back middle. Yeah, you with your hand up. Yep.
Yeah.
You with
right
your
there.
Yep. That right here. Yep.
Hey, I'm Matthew Raddick. I'm a fourth-year student in Information Systems and Analytics, and this is a question mostly for Bill, but the others can obviously answer too. Do you think that there's been a decline in children's educational, like science-related programs? Because when you were on the air, there was also Popular Mechanics for Kids and a couple other programs. Do you think that there's been a decline in this, and this might actually, like, not overall, but might be negative towards introducing people to science and making just children more interested in science generally?
No. Here's why I say that. So you're a fan of the Science Guy show. I love you, man. Well, man. No, I put my heart and soul into that thing. Ada, did you watch it?
No.
Yeah. But you get a lot of people did. Yeah.
I watched it.
Caitlin
I love you.
I watched it.
I love you, Mr. Prime Minister. So, does everybody know who Derek Muller is? How about Physics Girl, Diana Collin, and then Emily Calandrelli. So what's happened, instead of making a television show that's constrained by the clock, now people are making videos for the electric internet, where it's it's the same kind of information packaged in a new way to a new audience. And but I will say that we had very compelling evidence that 10 years old was as old as you, or about as old as you could be to get the so-called lifelong passion for science. Like Caitlin, it was before you were 10, yeah?
Oh, yeah, sure.
And Ada was before.
I wasn't here.
No, but you got excited about science before you were 10 years old.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, way before you were 10.
Yeah.
And so one thing about the emerging science videos, mostly, if I can say the brand name YouTube, is they're not necessarily addressed to toddlers and people who are 7 or 8 years old. And that is something that is worthy of a chin stroke.
Yesterday, no, 2 days ago, and I'm absolutely serious, I watched a YouTube video with my son, who's 10, about them. Some guy dropped a molten hot or a red hot ball of metal into a glass filled with Skittles to see what would happen. And you know, there's so many of those slow motion exploding things. Well, you know,
the function of Skittles in the presence of molten steel.
Well, what would you think happened?
I think you'd have a rapid melting.
Rapid melting,
and
yes.
And gas evolved. They might have a big.
No, it wasn't. It was all liquid, but it was like this carbonized black goop that prevents you from ever wanting to eat Skittles again. But that whole question of that whole question of, well, what happens if you do this? I mean, YouTube is great for that, and that access to so many more scientific or pseudo-scientific experiments. What happens if I drop an anvil on a watermelon? You know, those questions are now answered in places other than our own backyards.
So, words to live by. I worked at Boeing for a while on 747 airplanes. And as I like to say, don't worry, I was very well supervised. Like, it's cool. But there's a Boeing lore was a test pilot named Tex Johnston who did a barrel roll with the prototype 707. You guys remember a 707? It's the jet airliner that looked like a jet airliner. And he did a roll with it, which, you know, you don't normally do. I don't know how many airplanes you've been on, but they don't normally turn them all the way over. And he landed, and, you know, Boeing management expressed concern. Like, what are you doing? And he said, I'm selling airplanes. And he affected that. Have you ever seen The Right Stuff, that movie?
Yeah.
He was a World War II veteran, and everybody started talking like Chuck Yeager, this like down holler West Virginia country. You know, I'm just an old country boy flying this amazing jet airplane. And then the second thing he said was, or he said, supposed to have said, was, one test is worth 1,000 expert opinions. And that's really the name of the game in science, right? You can speculate, but when you really drop the molten ball into the Skittles, that's when you find out what would really happen. And this is really an important idea right now. We're living at this extraordinary time where people have this idea, this notion that your opinion is as good as peer-reviewed scientific research. We have people running around, mostly in the United States, actually genuinely spending time on the electric Twitter machine about the Earth maybe being flat.
Yeah.
I mean, if I may, like, dude, the Earth is round. We got pictures from space, you know, like, if its world is flat, why don't you go to the edge and take a picture with your phone and send it to everybody? And the guy wanted to have he had a Kickstarter campaign to build a spacecraft that would go up high enough to take a picture of the flat Earth. I invited him to the launch. If you for some reason are not members of the Planetary Society, which would be weird, I encourage you all to check us out at planetary.org, and we're going to launch our second solar sail after June 13th in Cape Canaveral. If you've never been to a launch, it really is amazing. It's amazing. So I invited the guy to come to a launch, but just that you have that way of thinking in the 21st century is astonishing to me. And what we got to do is include people. That somehow, like you and Caitlin, I mean, science is your thing. It's your world, right? But there's people who have somehow, if I may, fallen off the edge. What is that?
There is no edge. You just established that.
That's right, yeah. That somehow have not been included and not embraced this process that it brought us so much prosperity. You know, we have, when I was 9, I went to the World's Fair in New York, New York. The town's so nice, they named it twice. And the United Nations had a total board of the world's human population, and it was believed to be about 3 billion people, 1965. Yes, there were people alive in 1965. I know, it's hard to believe. And now there's 7.4 billion, and by the time you guys are my age, certainly there will be 9 billion. there might be 10 billion people. And they're all going to want to live and eat and carry on the internet and so on the way we do in the developed world. And to provide for all those people, we're going to have to use science. The agriculture of the future is going to feed more people. The medicine of the future is going to save or improve the lives of more people. And the people who make a living farming or working in a job in a factory or an office or a law firm or wherever it is are going to drink water that you are going to purify. And so the future is very exciting. But the fundamental idea that's going to be different for you all than it was for me, and especially my immediate ancestors, is I think we're going to, as humans, we have to look at the world as our world, like a sort of a Star Trek vision or Star Wars vision, where you go to a planet, and for the simplicity of storytelling, the whole planet is this one thing. The whole planet, on this planet, everybody speaks one language. On this planet, everybody wears snowshoes. On this planet, everybody swings through the jungle on vines or whatever it is. Humans are going to have to look at the world and the environment differently, in that we are in charge. We are going to be running the show, for better or for worse. We are responsible for the health of the ecosystems, which in turn control or manage our health. And so that's where I look to you all to take this world view, and this is where I look really, Mr. Prime Minister, to Canada. You have this unique situation where you have this extraordinary diversity and this extraordinary environment, and you have this extraordinary renewable resources. And so I'm very excited, very much appreciate you all inviting me, because as a guy who grew up in the US, I look to Canada as a world leader in this unique combination of passion, artistic thinking, respect for the stewardship of the environment, and diversity. So let's take, can we get another question? Thank you. But if we don't get a question about this, I'm going to ask it. But let's see what happens.
Yeah, well, we have time for one more question. I know we could go all day. Let's try over on this side at the, right here. I don't know where the person with the microphone is. Right there.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Maxime Lee. I'm a fourth-year student in health sciences here at the university. My question is regarding healthcare. So what policies or practices do you know of that encourage syncretism in healthcare innovation, that make sure that all perspectives of traditional and modern medicine are taken into consideration to build a more inclusive healthcare system for all of Canada? Thank you.
Thank you.
I think there's, well, one of the fundamental things that's a strength but also a challenge in our healthcare system is that we don't have a healthcare system in Canada. We have 10 different provinces with 10 different healthcare systems that focus on delivery in, around the same principles but different ways. Of course, the territories do their thing as well. So we need to make sure that we are treating all Canadians to the quality level that they expect, but there is an ability to innovate and to adapt to local challenges where in some places you have a more rapidly aging population. Sorry, the population is not aging more rapidly. There's more elders there, so the demographics is going up. There's a relativity hole in New Brunswick.
Yeah, the whole
going to explain that. But
second law of thermodynamics, man.
that challenge that we have is, of course, making sure that as we have a population that is aging, as we have a population that is living longer, which is a good thing as we solve for many challenges.
Because they can keep paying taxes.
We have to make sure that they stay healthier. And of course, it is more expensive to extend someone's life from 90 to 100 than it would be to extend someone's life from 50 to 60, for example. So we have to be a lot more innovative in embracing new technologies, folding in AI, folding in personalized medicine, making sure that we're drawing on traditional knowledges, Indigenous and otherwise, that have understood certain things about longevity and healthiness that we don't always get. I mean, one of the great examples is, for a while, through the latter half of the 20th century, giving birth became a very clinical, medical intervention where, it's really a very natural thing that that has been done without the help of hospitals for centuries. Now, it was not as successful, and the rate of maternal mortality was a lot higher. But is there a middle ground where we can respect and understand sort of natural processes and not feel we have to laboratorify them? That's a real word. I've got an English degree that I can.
Yes.
But there's lots of reflections we have to do around quality of life, quality of care, quality of outcomes within our health system. And one of the things that the federal government is very much focusing on, partnering with the provinces, because of course that's a provincial area of jurisdiction, is encouraging the kind of innovation, encouraging the kind of approach around patient-centered science, research, and treatment that is going to lead us down the right path.
So before we go, I know it's time to go, but I've gotten a lot of messages from my colleagues in the environmental community, and I've been to Fort McMurray, Alberta. It really is an amazing place in the most troubling way. But this pipeline, Kinder Morgan, if you don't mind, tell my colleagues in the States, tell us about the Kinder Morgan pipeline. And because everybody, if you got nothing else to do before you're done, check out the solutionsproject.org. You familiar with the Solutions Project? These are civil engineers mostly. Mostly at Stanford University, right near San Francisco. Done an analysis that you could power all of Canada renewably right now if you just decided to do it. In the prairie provinces, there's so much wind. Even here, on a day like this, there's so much solar energy that if you could capture it and solve the storage and transmission problems, you could run the whole place. Nevertheless, there's this enormous fossil fuel industry, right? So tell us about that.
Okay. First of all, I agree. There is a tremendous potential for renewable energy, for wind, for solar, for geothermal, for tidal, for all the new things that we haven't developed yet that are coming down the line, and we should be very excited about it. And that's why we are investing massively in renewables, in research and science towards that. However, we can't get there tomorrow, right? We're not going to get there tomorrow. So we are going to have a transition phase while we develop alternatives to fossil fuels. So while we are developing those alternatives to fossil fuels, we still need to be able to power our homes, our cars, our economy, and we have to get there. We have to do it in the most efficient and non-polluting way, absolutely. And that's what we're very much focused on. Now, 50 years ago, people knew there were oil sands resources in Alberta. They just didn't know how to actually convert that into any usable fuel. Technology allowed us to develop ways of extracting the bitumen and making use of it.
There was a chemical engineer.
That's right. It was
turned asphaltene into usable oil.
It was a scientific challenge that was solved by innovation. Now the similar challenge we're facing is how do we draw on fossil fuels in the short term or in the while we're still dealing with transition in a way that does not contribute to global warming, that does not contribute as massively to climate change as it always has. So we need to figure out how to get there. That's why one of the things we're quite pleased with as we've moved forward on an actual plan to reach our carbon reduction targets under the Paris agreements is that Alberta has put in an absolute cap on oil sands emissions. No matter how much the industry grows or develops, you will never be able to put more than, I think it's 100 megatons, and right now they're at about 80, into the atmosphere. So that's an absolute cap that we actually calculate in with our plan on reaching the Paris Agreement targets. But on top of that, if Alberta is going to move forward on that, and if the entire country is going to move forward as we are on a national price on carbon, a framework that prices carbon pollution, either through a carbon tax or through a cap and trade system, depending on what the provinces want, we are actually going to reach our carbon reduction targets. So it's a piece, they're pieces that all go together. We're putting in a national price on carbon, which allows Alberta to put a cap on its oil sands emissions, as long as we are able to get, in the meantime, while we're still in this transition, our fossil fuel resources to new markets in the Pacific. Right now, the only market we have for our fossil fuels is to the United States, and therefore it gets massively discounted. If we can get our fossil fuels to new markets in the Pacific, we actually Alberta does better, our Canadian economy does better, and we're making sure that we're innovating to keep things safe. Now, a pipeline is safer than oil by rail, certainly safer than oil by trucks. A modern pipeline can be very carefully monitored and can be done safely. The oceans part of it, we've invested in an oceans protection plan that is over $1 billion to make sure that prevention, cleanup, partnership with Indigenous peoples, protection of marine mammals are all at the forefront and doing better than just about any country in the world, with the possible exception of Norway, on oceans protection, although we're looking to get to the Norway standards.
In Ottawa than there are in Norway.
Yeah, well, but they do a great job.
Norway's about 4 million people.
But they do a great job in oceans protections as well. So all of those things together, make up our plan on addressing climate change. Now, there are people who don't like certain pieces of it. There are people who love the fact that we have a national price on carbon, but really wish we weren't approving the Kinder Morgan pipeline. There are other people, many of them in Alberta and on the other side of the political spectrum from me, who really like the idea that we're building that pipeline, but really hate the idea that we're bringing in a national price on carbon. But I think most people understand that the environment and the economy need to go together. And we have to make responsible choices that's going to move us in the direction of getting off of our massive dependence on fossil fuels, to be able to do more renewables, although I think I've seen that jet fuel is going to be really hard to replace fossil fuels right?
No, yeah, so we want you guys, it's probably hydrogen turbines for jet airplanes. Air transport is a huge problem that I want one of you chemical engineer people or mechanical engineers to figure out.
But we're going to be figuring that out, and the way to do it is to move forward responsibly in both protecting our environment and protecting the jobs and the economy that still is reliant on fossil fuels and will be for another number of years. How many years that is depends a lot on the scientists in this room as we innovate, as we push forward. But you know, one of those things in politics is when you create that solution in the middle that have some people on one side really angry about certain parts of it and others on the other side really angry about different parts of it, most Canadians sort of feel that you've probably found that reasonable path forward that is going to both develop in responsible ways and protect our environment, which is what Canada's all about.
Well, thank you very much. This has been wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for being here today. Bill Nye, the science guy.
Thank you very much for including me, you all.
Yeah, this has been great.
Last question.
And of course, let's give it up to Ada and Caitlin, who are going to be making some great discoveries in the future, as I'm sure all of you will too. Thank you very much. Thank you, Caitlin.